Esteemed audience, we take it a notch higher through informative and intellectual debates here on Kenya's #1 debate platform. This is season 9 of Western Region. I am your host, Chris Boru.
And I am Esperanza Kapanga. Today we're going to have a monetary conversation with the motion, debt limits should be put in place to control debt burden on developing countries.
In the proposition, we have the ladies from Lugulu Girls High School.
And in the opposition, we have Mbale High School. Proposer number 1, you have 3 minutes to make a statement.
Debt limits should be put in place to control debt burdens in developing countries. To be more clear, according to the Investopedia, debt limit is a time of which a task must be completed before the time reaches. To be more clear, or on the other hand, a debt. A debt is the amount of money borrowed by one party from another. Valerie Ishmael Inonda, Lugulu Girls High School. Let us look at this. Debt limits restrains a country from getting loans from other countries. Let us take an example, or a real-life example, I might say. You give me a debt. You don't give me a limit. You tell me you'll just pay back. Obviously, I'll be at lax to reply or to give you back your money. I will go borrow someone else when I need more money. I will not come back to you, obviously, because I've borrowed you before. But because you've not given me a date limit, I will not come back to you. I will go to someone else and borrow money. What is this doing to me? Is it reducing my debts? No way. It's going to increase my debts. I'm going to have a bigger burden on my side. Let us look at this. It puts a country on toes so that the country can put more development or can prioritize on more development to avoid being put in the CBR. The CBR means the Credit Reference Bureau. Every country or no country desires to be put in the CBR. Because when a country is put on the CBR, this simply means, or this simply implies that your country is indebted and you cannot pay the debt. What country do you think would like to be associated with a country that does not pay debts? No way. I cannot get myself associated with someone or a country, I might say, that does not pay debts. I'll give you a debt. I'll wait and wait and wait. You'll not pay me back on time. Obviously, I will not develop a good relationship with you. Let us take a good example. According to www.org Google, once, or I might say, an economist said that these debt limits, whenever they are put, these leaders, they focus more, or they put most of their energy, or what do I say? They put their all in making sure that when this time reaches, this promotes or makes the country to have some sense of maturity in them. Like, I have a debt, I'm supposed to repay it within this time. So I'll work hard and do my best so that I can be able to make this debt in time. And I am going to make sure that by the time this limit reaches, I pay these debts. So these debt limits, they should be put in place. Because obviously when they're put in place, we'll have less debt burdens on our side. Inonda Valerie Ishmael, Lugulu Girls High School.
First proposal, you have 3 minutes to make your submissions.
Whoever fears debt is a failure. What do I mean? For us to succeed, our desire to succeed should supersede our fear to fail. All the way from Mbale High School, I strongly oppose this motion that states debt limits should be put in place to control debt burden in developing countries. Just to put all of us on the same page, allow me to define some of the key terms of this motion. Debt is something given to somebody to be paid over a given period of time. Burden, according to the English Dictionary, 9th edition, burden is defined as a duty, responsibility that causes worry, difficulty, and hard work. What do I mean by saying worry and hard work? These debts will put us on toes to work even more hard to better our status as developing countries. Developing countries. This refers to the countries with less developed base and a low human development index relative to other countries. What does this motion mean? Debt limits, according to my own understanding, are just brought in to deter these developing countries from reaching their goals. Debt limits are put to limit our success. We actually need these debts for us to achieve our goals. A good example like Kenya. We have the Big Four agenda. We cannot achieve these goals on our own. We actually need these debts. Take for an instance, we have a project. Yes, our status as developing country, we are not promising enough that after being lent this amount of money, we'll be able to pay back. And the project will give us a lot of money. How can we implement these projects if we put debt limits? Why do we oppose this motion? We have put zero poverty as the first sustainable development goal, but we are still struggling with poverty in developing countries. Why? We are concentrating on how we are going to pay these debts, instead of us coming together, finding ways on how we can use these debts to better our status as developing countries. Only God can limit our success, and it's only God who can limit how far we can go. If, my dear proposers, you have visions, ambitions for better future of these nations, join us to oppose this motion. To debate is my aim. Charles Mweri is my name. I rest my case.
Second proposer, you have 3 minutes for cross-examination.
Debt limits should be put in place to control debt burdens in developing countries. Just before I continue, there was a speaker here, my opposer here, said that whoever fears a debt is a failure. Nobody said that we should not borrow. We should just have debt limits to pay the debt on time. He has also said that we cannot achieve success on our own, that we need these debts. I want to prove you wrong. Because if a country believes in itself, if you have that self-confidence as a country, you can actually achieve access without necessarily relying on debts. You can actually do it, my friend. You can achieve success. It just takes for you to believe in yourself as a country, and you can do it without needing these debts. I stand here to strongly propose this motion that debt limits should be put in place to control debt burdens in developing countries. Why? Because debt limits are going to help curb cases of corruption. What do I mean by this? You get that determined or focused leaders will work diligently to clear off the loans on time by prioritizing their development agendas. You get that our country Kenya, for instance, our country Kenya, due to lack of transparency and accountability, it has come to play that corruption has come in. When we attain these debts from other countries like, let's say, China, our leaders up there, they squander the money. Even before the money gets down to development, the leaders already squander the money. Now, if the leaders squander this money, and then they put the little share of the amount of money onto development, how are we going to be able to pay back the debt? But once we have debt limits, once a country has told you that you must pay your debt within this time, the leaders are not going to be able to squander the money. Or if it's going to be there, it's going to be minimal. Because if they squander the money, and then they put little money to development, then they'll be able to earn back little of the profit, and that is going to give them a hard time in paying back their debt. According to World Bank, Ethiopia, Rwanda, and Ghana have been listed as countries able to utilize their money and even double it more. So we need these debt limits so that leaders can actually stop the habit of squandering money so that they can be able to pay their debts on time. Debt limits rejuvenate the country's economic activities, bringing about economic maturity. Let me ask you a question. If I were to lend you money and I tell you that you must return that money after a certain period of time, do you want to tell me that you're going to go for that business that will just bring you the exact amount of money? Really? No way. You are going to go for that booming business that will actually bring in interest so that you'll actually be able to pay the debt and also not go at a loss. I think I'm correct on that. So we should have debt limits. We should have them because they are going to enable the country to be able to pay the debt on time so that there'll be development in their own country. Thank you. Anguzuzu Valerie, Lugulu Girls High School.
Second opposer, you have 3 minutes for rebuttal.
Out of the world of fantasy to the world of reality. How do we view our country? It has got a low potential. We don't refuse it. And one of the best ways of making a change is by accepting your weakness. I'm Sterling Mokelo, student from Mbale High, strongly opposing the motions that says debt limits should be put in place to control debt burden. In contrary to the motion, I wish to say, we have got very many sustainable development goals to achieve. So, where do we get all the money to achieve 17 sustainable development goals if we are not able to ask for debts? 2, I wish to read for you something that will clarify and tell you all that is true. A poem entitled Together as One. We see the vision and the strength is our weapon. Don't interfere with our mission that will take us to our beacon. Our banner is still blazing. Sisters, stop blazing. Let's work together in unity to fulfill the Harambee philosophy. I leave you to internalize and tell me the information posted in such a reference. I wish to tell you something on the debts have helped us to influence implementation. Because we are given the debts, we are given the man. This gives us a wide room for improvement and development. When I find that there's a source where I can get my capital, why don't I need to invest on my business? Secondly, one good attitude or one good factor or even one good quality of an entrepreneur is that an entrepreneur takes risks. What is the meaning of this risk? You're risking even though you don't have the capital, but the moment you get the capital, you utilize it in order to get profit and expand on your business. I wish to correct the member who said that on these debts, there are burden in a case that we are unable to pay our debts. I wish to tell you that it's not true. Because how are we unable? We have ideological minds that will utilize these few loans that we are given in order to succeed. I beg to leave.
The proposers have been asked, how will countries that have minimal resources develop themselves if they are not allowed to take debts? The opposers have been asked, if countries live on debts, how exactly will they develop, considering that they will have to pay them back with interest? Proposer number 3, you have 3 minutes to respond.
How can a country with minimal resources develop themselves. I will read to you the motion again. Debt limits should be put in place to control debt burden in developing countries. Are we saying people should not borrow? That is not our point. People should borrow with debt limits. You should borrow money to develop your country, borrow money to solve your issues, and borrow money for various issues in your country with debt limits. When you're given a date limit, it means you're given this amount of money, but you're told within a stipulated amount of time, the money should have been paid back. My second proposer said that debts should be utilized. Are we getting on which side this opposer is? We are talking about utilization of debts. If we have date limits, we will be able to utilize our debts to pay back the debts, because if we utilize our debts very well, we should have profits to enable us to pay back our debts and still have money to develop our country. I will talk about reduced slavery subjected to developing countries. Among China's debtors, we have Angola with 25 billion US dollars, which is the first actually. And taking into consideration that Angola is the second largest oil producer in Africa. Where does all their money go? To paying China's debts. Angola is poor. Angola is struggling with its finances simply because they are paying debts using all the amount of resources they get. They use all their oil that is produced to pay debts. They can't even develop themselves. Number 2 is Ethiopia with 13.5 billion US dollars. And third comes our beloved country with 7.9 billion shillings. Who does not know of the existence of Chinese in Kenya? A few weeks ago, most of us were on half-term, on Citizen TV, on JKL Live. We saw that 2,500 children, Chinese children, are in Kenya, excluding their mothers and fathers. Are we not being colonized simply because the government could not speak up? Because it is guarding its interests, its international relations with China, because we have its debts. When you have someone's debt, you don't harass them. You take them slowly and do what they want, because otherwise they could do big things to them. And we talked about making friends. Apparently, let me just clear that out because it seems to make doubt. Our country does not want to we don't make friends with countries that have debts, because after all countries have debts. Even the US has debts. But still, if you're put on the CBR, it means you are almost bankrupt. You cannot borrow debts, you cannot borrow from anywhere, and you're a bad example. Ivy Musundi, Lugulu Girls.
Third opposer, you have 3 minutes to respond to your question.
Slavish JD from Mbale High School. Allow me to tackle the question that you were asked by the audience. The question was, how can countries develop when living on debts? We have measures put in place so as to pay back the debts. Allow me to give you some of the facts and statistics we got from www.researchgate.com on how to pay the debts. Number 1, through exploitation of resources. I believe the money that we borrow is meant for developing our country. So, if the money borrowed is used in development, then, believe me through the exploitation of the resources, part of the money can be used in payment of debts. Secondly, through foreign exchange. I believe we are Kenyans, and for us to be called Kenyans, we are patriots of this nation. We have tourist attraction sites in our country. We can use those tourist attractions to earn foreign exchange, thus used to pay our debts. Again, accountability. What do I mean by accountability? In business studies, I understand accountability as recording each and every transaction that takes place in a business organization. For this case, we shall be able to account for each and every resources coming in and going out of our country. Will we not resolve in paying our debts? I believe we will. To our third proposer, you talked about Angola and Ethiopia having debts. Angola has oil, but they've not paid. I can tell you they have not put in place the measures on how to repay back the loans. But if they could do so, I believe they could be not suffering. Again, you talked about us borrowing the money, and yet we are suffering in paying back and not enjoying the things that we've used with the money. Remember, you cannot plant a tree today and expect to eat the fruits tomorrow. I guess you can concur with me as my audience. Again, talking about these debts and limits. According to the Daily Nation, we have the budget of the 2019-2020. We have 2.8 trillion, and we have a deficit of 607.8 billion. Where will this money come from if we don't borrow these debts? I think these debts, indeed, when we borrow them, they will indeed help us develop. And through the developments, we shall firmly again stand to pay back the debts. It is high time that we don't rest this case, but we bury the case 6 feet under, because buried things can never come back to life. Before you, Levi Shijedi, once again, Mbale High School. Thank you.
Proposers, you have 1 minute to make a final submission.
I hear you quote our budget, and I ask myself one question. Are you trying to tell us that we should borrow again to pay China? According to the Evolving World, Book 4, on page 47, the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, was started in 1945 December to help countries, developing countries with currency crisis. Why should you go borrowing in a country when you have the IMF, which is a special agency of the UN? It is there to help you. And I will repeat again. We are not against borrowing debts. We are just advocating that there should be debt limits within which these debts should be paid. Some countries actually take advantage because the interests keep growing. They do not give you a debt limit so that you can pay with a bigger interest. Let us take into consideration the debt limits and not the dates. The debts. Ivy Musundi, Lugulu girls.
Opposers, you have 1 minute to make a final submission.
The smile of the face does not imply to the joy of the heart. I can see. I clap for you. I see. But let me tell you something. Do you know that targets are not meant to show your brightness, but are meant to show your potential? Do you know that? I guess you don't. I wish to give you some of the clarifications that show that we have to get the debts, you have to get the loans in order to meet our goals. We talk of the 2019-2020 budget. We can see. Look at how we have a big problem or a big crisis if we don't have to get the loans. See, we can tell you that look at the 2.8 trillion. Among it, we have the deficit of 607.8 billion. Do you expect us to move around because we don't have the 607.8 billion to sustain our goals? We still have the potential because the debts are meant to give us the courage and create a room for development, because the mind is an hidden resource that none of you thinks of. Your brain has got the ideas, And remember that a negative and a negative equals to a positive. Thank you.
Lugulu girls tried to give us the case of America, but they didn't use it as a country that has actually that limit. You didn't give us any country either that has that limit, and then use it for your strong point of development, like what is happening in America. You said, and you kept on stating that America borrows, but you failed to actually key in the fact that it also has what? A limit.
To the Mbale team, also a fairly good presentation by Charles. And then to Okello, there was no rebuttal done at all. You did not poke into the submissions given by your opponents. Okay? Yet there was enough information to poke. There was enough. Then we also noted a good attempt to answer questions, and also an attempt to give solutions on the measures to take. However, there was an element of lack of research from what you had presented. So up to that point, let me wish the best team good luck.
Lugulu Girls High School. The judges awarded you 69.1%. Let's give them a round of applause. Mbale High School. The judges awarded you 66%. Let's give them a round of applause. With that being said, we'd like to congratulate Lugulu Girls High School for being the greater debater in this debate.
That's it for today's conversation here on stage. But for you at home, keep the conversation going with the hashtag GDC for SDGs. Thank you for staying with us. Thank you for all the schools that take part in our debates. I have been your host, Esperanza Kapanga.
Until the next episode, I've been Chris Borus. Stay tuned.